This is Interbeing, Held in Belonging.
My dad was the one who ended up spreading his ashes over the side of the mountain. He threw the ashes over, and I think he said something kind of like, "Be free now," and we all were kind of stunned at what happened next as we watched my grandfather's ashes spiral back up to the sky in a very intelligent way. It wasn't random wind turning it in a certain way, but this really intelligent, beautiful spiral.
Welcome. Before we begin, take a moment to arrive. Near the end of life, there are moments when something seems to return. A clearing of the mind, a quiet presence, a sense that the boundaries we live by may be more permeable than we imagine. In these moments, often described as terminal lucidity, the relational nature of our lives comes into focus, how we remain in connection even as we are leaving. Beneath all of our stories runs a deeper one, a reality science is only beginning to touch. Spirituality has long gestured toward, and that many of us recognize most clearly in moments of awe, love, and loss, is an exploration of these crossings between self and other, life and death, the known and the felt. Today I am honored to welcome Karalee Kothe, a PhD student and researcher studying terminal lucidity, into this conversation.
I guess it started more with a general interest in kind of near-death happenings or events, or you could call them miracles. Long before I even knew what terminal lucidity was, I kind of had just a general interest in the afterlife and what comes next for us. There has to be something more at the end of life, and perhaps at the beginning of life too. I was something before I was this, so if you're something before you're born, that means you're something after you die as well. I guess it didn't really become personal to me until my grandfather died, and I was 19 at the time. We were going to spread his ashes on a mountaintop, but it ended up being a really special day. Some kind of reverent feeling came over us all. It was like my whole family, we gathered to do this. And at that time, my mom was there too. Her dad, he's the one who died, came into her mind and told her, everything is as it should be. And so at that moment, we all felt his presence, and it was like, if we're feeling his presence after his death, he's still here in some form. And that grandfather, he's gone on to visit me and several of my other family members. I felt his presence again later, and so there's no doubt that he was somewhere and he was able to reach out to us.
And I'm curious, sitting with that, with how real that presence felt, what, if anything, shifted for you after that?
So at that point, I was really directly convinced that there was an afterlife, and so I kind of got into more death studies. And I noticed as I studied it more, I felt a kind of inner transformation as well. I felt my own kind of fear of death starting to reduce. The more I read about these stories, I started to read about near-death experiences where people came close to death and seemed to cross over and come back. And most of the stories is just this really positive, beautiful experience where people are met with an unconditional love. And so after experiencing my grandfather and feeling his presence after he died, after reading about so many other people's stories of these really miraculous, loving, transforming things that happen close to death, I thought, I just got to study this more. I wanted to study consciousness, and it seemed like going towards a boundary state like death was a good way at getting at the mystery of consciousness. And so one thing led to another, kind of serendipity, and I wound up with this international team studying terminal lucidity, the lighting up before death. And we went on to collect some really beautiful stories of dying children and adults where they had a quite spiritual, expansive moment shortly before dying. That's what we're calling terminal lucidity.
And as you're witnessing those moments with children and adults alike, I'm wondering what began to show itself in those spaces just before death.
Yes, we had really, all the children's stories were really miraculous because the children would have experiences and show insight way beyond their developmental understanding. All the children seemed to understand what death was and that they were dying, and they also seemed to understand that they were going to an afterlife and reassured their loved ones, to not worry about them. There was one kid who was dying for a while. I think he's 7 years old, dying of cancer. So it was a long process for him and his family. When he'd go into this comatose state, he would kind of have visions or dreams he would come back and talk about. He would often go to a library when he was in this state, and this was relevant to him because reading and going to the library was one of his favorite places. He would come and tell his mom and his caretakers, yeah, like, don't worry about me. I'm just going to go to the library when I die. And he met somebody at this library. He met a man there, and he was describing this man to his mom. And she began to recognize who he was describing. He was describing her brother, her child's uncle, who died before her son was born. So her son had no context for this. This young kid was already interacting with this uncle who was on the other side when he went to the library and had that knowledge to share with his mom. So I think it's kind of a good example of the way the veil gets thinner, and especially for children. Seems like there's someone there for them.
Listening to you talk about this, I'm wondering what you notice and how children seem to meet these moments.
The children feel really at ease with it, and this child in particular felt really at ease with what was happening to him and where he was going. He's going to end up in the library like with his uncle.
And what is it like to be with these stories?
Yeah, with this story and all the children's stories, it's just like reading it, you're immediately tearful, and you're reading it in the words of one of their parents or a nurse or other caretaker who was with them at those last moments. It's quite touching, and it's just touching to think about such a young kid being the one who's at ease with it all, and so hard for a child to die, but it's just profound that a child can feel so at peace with this process that we as adults, we really struggle to let go.
So when you sit with all of this, these stories, these moments near death, what has this work actually changed for you? How has it shaped the way you think about consciousness, or what it means to be alive?
To me, something that I've been personally hung up on this whole time and keep coming back to is the way the fear of death seems to be directly related to our spiritual development and our well-being overall. And then on the flip side, reduced fear of death seems to improve well-being in a very tangible way. Reduced anxiety, reduced depression, increased gratitude, increased joy, increased peace, as well as a natural kind of spiritual expansion with less and less fear of death. So studying terminal lucidity myself has affected me, and I reduced my own fear of death and seeing the things I've learned from the dying, which is that nobody seems to die alone. It seems to be like a very loving process, and like we're kind of guided over to the other side. There seems to be a lot more going on here than we can understand. And it seems to be that death isn't the end.
I really appreciate how you hold this. Thank you, Karalee, for all your work and for sharing this with us. Before we part, I invite you to pause with what you've just heard. Not to analyze it, not to decide what you believe, simply to let it land. Wherever you are, allow your body to settle. If it feels comfortable, soften your gaze, or close your eyes. Take one slow breath in and a longer breath out. And again. As you breathe, notice this. You are here, and you are not alone.